FDOT approved. That's something we've heard a lot. And in talking to the FDOT engineers that I spoke to, they say the contracts we have with municipalities depend upon municipalities to do all of the measurements and all the calculations. We do not go out and verify. We do not go out on site and verify every measurement and every description of an intersection. They don't have the manpower to do that. So when you hear FDOT verified, yes, they have verified. It is approved. But it's based upon only what's coming from the municipality, not the fact that FDOT has physically gone out there themselves and said, yes, this is correct. So that's important to know when you're taking that into consideration.
They approved it, they approved it.
Right.
Doesn't matter whether they checked it or not.
I'm going based upon what I was told. I talked to District 7.
They approved it.
Right.
Whether they verified it doesn't matter. They approved it. If they chose to approve it without verifying it,
It's their fault.
The short yellow is based on issues with the discrepancy between the timing and the signal and what shows up on the video. That is a smaller amount, but the videos themselves do show that there was an issue. There's a clear discrepancy between the equipment, and not only what's on the video, but what's on the timing loop conduction, which is actually separately determined from what's in the video. So my question would be related to that. How do you verify the timing of every single thing when the video says it's not adding up? How do you know for sure without testing it in some way, and how do you test it without using video? That would be my question. We had a meeting about this 2 weeks ago, and I didn't really get an answer to that. I heard that the certification of the equipment by the manufacturer was complete and valid. I'm sure that's true. But how, other than looking at surveillance video that's used to prosecute people, would you actually determine that this is what really happened? How do you know what that yellow time was if the machine says, the timing machine says, yes, it was this, but we see 4 frames are short of the yellow, 30th of a second. I don't want to get too technical, but if there are 4 frames too short, how can you guarantee that it's the video's fault?
What do you mean a frame?
A frame of video, I'm sorry. Video is shot at 30 frames per second. So for every second, there's 30 frames of video. Just like the video in this room, video cameras, it's all pretty standard. The videos that ATS uses are 30.0% or 30.0 frames per second. So how can you say that the videos that are showing, and you may have a video an hour later that's showing the right time. And are you saying that there were frames missing? Are you saying that the frame rate somehow dropped only at those 6 camera approaches? It seems to me that they're trying to say that the cameras aren't reliable at the same time saying that the cameras are reliable. So it can't really be both ways. I understand the purpose of them is not timing. I know that. They're not made for timing, but they are showing that there might be issues with the timing. And yes, we've had things replaced, and yes, the police review are throwing out all the short yellows now. But, so we don't really have the videos to double verify that stuff anymore to see if it's really still happening. But, to say that the videos aren't accurate, but they're okay for, prosecuting people seems a little wrong to me. There was never any proven issue with the validity of the videos. And when ATS was in the room 2 weeks ago, there was no mention of the fact, yes, our videos are sometimes 4 frames too fast, sometimes, 1 1/3 seconds too fast. They didn't really say too much in the meeting, but they didn't come out there and say that. So, who are we supposed to believe? Are we supposed to believe the video that we prosecute people with that shows that something was missing? Or are we supposed to believe the timing that has no video record, no per cycle record with a timer that says this light was yellow for this long? And my stance on this would be, if there's a question, why don't you err on the side of safety and say, these people should be refunded because we can't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that our equipment was not at fault. Do the right thing. That's what I would say in those cases. So that's just me on innocent. I would like to mention, related to this, January 9th is when I requested the videos of the 247 short yellow citations that were as a result, possibly as a result of equipment issues. It's 9 weeks later, I still don't have it. I'm going to ask for another update, but last time I requested videos, it took half this long again. So hopefully they're forthcoming. I don't know. And that's it for the short yellow side. Again, you're looking at a total of probably 1,600 short yellows just at those 3 slope issues. As to how much you could refund, that's going to be something you'll have to address with the state. If you could find out from the state if it would be okay to say we're refunding and we're going to withhold this much from how much we give you, that might be one idea. But again, I'm not involved, but I think the state doesn't want to give up.
Yeah, I was going to say, they ain't gonna do that.
But that could be something to ask. It doesn't hurt to ask, because they're going to get their money. But that would just be my suggestion, because yeah, some of these go back over 2 years. On to red light cameras. Cost neutrality, I believe the figure in the contract is 2.12 citations per day per camera average. And if it falls below that, that's the threshold per month. So if you have less than that number, then the amount of money that's refunded or that is charged is cost neutral to the vendor, not to city administration. So the cost neutrality clause does not factor in the cost of administering the program from the city's point of view. It doesn't include the police officer review. The cost neutrality does not give us an allowance of money. So even if the cost neutrality feature is enabled per camera, that does not compensate us or account in any way for our costs as a city. So that's something else to take into consideration. Yeah, the contract is spread across 13 PDFs, so it might take a while to get through the pages. I kind of wanted to mention something. I talked with a friend of mine who was a doctor about drug studies, and I told him about the report for red light cameras, and he came up with an interesting parallel story. He said it's a bit like doing a health study on the use of radium to treat tuberculosis and only concentrating on how many tuberculosis cases you have cured and completely ignoring the number of radiation poisoning cases that result. This red light camera report doesn't have non-camera injury crashes. It's not in there. You talk about injury crashes, those are red light camera or red light running related crashes only. There is no figure for non-red light running crashes. So you see this number going down of red light related injuries, but there's no parallel figure to show you what's happening on the other side. And another issue with the categorization, I was looking at the police reports. I've got over 500 police reports, read them all. Majority of them are rear ends. 1-sentence descriptions, very quick, unless it's a police training, and then it's 5 paragraphs. But what you notice in there, sorry, I just lost my what you notice in there, for instance, there was a crash, there was a right turn on red pedestrian crash. Well, where does it go in this chart, in these figures? Is it a pedestrian crash, or is it a right turn on red crash? Well, it can only be in one. So where is it? If we put it in the pedestrian crash, that's going to artificially deflate the right turn on red crash numbers. If we put it in the right turn on red crash numbers, that's going to artificially deflate the pedestrian crash numbers. And that's the issue with using a categorization system this way. I'd like to mention related to that, the mayor mentioned pedestrian and bicycle crashes. Safety was one of the most important factors in this. Well, look at the 2-year post-camera result, and you see 1.6% drop in pedestrian and bicycle crashes at red light camera intersections. You see a 25.1% drop at non-camera intersections. Has that had a real impact on safety? And is it even a big number? I would say that's completely inconclusive. I don't think that that says we're saving pedestrians and bicyclists, because it's almost the same. You know, just at the red light camera approaches, there's absolutely no change. The safety impact has been on the non-camera approaches. And that's something else I wanted to bring up. Mr. Curtis, you brought up the 6.0 or the 6% drop in crashes. That's only at the camera approaches.
Right.
That's not at the non-camera approaches at the camera intersections. That number is 2.6. Now, when the state asks for reporting, and the state does report, it's camera intersections. It's not approaches. And when the city has done statistical analysis, when that first Kinley-Horn report came out, it was based on intersections. And we looked at those intersections, not at specific approaches for the crashes. So if you're looking at 2.6% change, and you compare that to the 9% change, compare apples to apples, you're looking at 2.6 to 9. Not 6.0
Isn't
to
it some
9.
combination of the 6.5 and 2.6? It's some combination of the 6.5 and 2.6.
Right.
Some of the approaches are cambered and some of the approaches aren't.
Right, but I'm saying you're looking at only a handful of approaches, not
That's
the
why I
whole
wanted to
intersection.
know what it was at all intersections. That's exactly why I
Right.
asked that.
Well, that's not in here. I also wanted to mention, you know, unsafe, the Tampa Bay area being unsafe. We're always ranked high in dangerous drivers. Allstate Insurance, which is one of the largest insurers in the country, especially after they bought another insurance company, they rank by city. And I thought it'd be interesting to share where St. Pete ranks related to Tampa, and whether it's going up or down. Last year, Tampa ranked 176th. They were toward the bottom of the list. St. Pete, 79. So lumping us all together as a region is not really a valid way of evaluating that. We are twice as safe as Tampa. You look at the number of insurance claims, you look at the number of crashes reported to insurance industry members, which is completely different from police reports, because a lot more gets reported. And St. Pete is a lot safer than Tampa. Much, much safer. So categorizing us as a region, I don't think accurately reflects the fact that we have much safer drivers here in St. Pete than they have across the bay.
Did we get
And yes, we should be proud of that.
Did we get safer since we got the cameras?
We have gotten less safe. 2011, 74 was our rank. 2012, 77 was our rank. 2013, 79 was our rank.
Where we stand?
They went from 176 to 183, back down to 176.
Is that based on all accidents?
That's based upon
all
insurance.
intersections or camper?
That's insurance, that's the whole set, it's the whole, it's the whole set. It's based on drivers though, it's based on driving, not necessarily all
It
claims.
doesn't break down
No,
between.
it's a nationwide, largest cities accounting. So
Yeah, it was good twice.
take that as a point of pride, we are a lot safer than Tampa, which I think you all know.
Yeah, twice as much, so that's a percentage.
I also wanted to mention right turn on red enforcement. If you actually look in the numbers at the crash report, it's tiny. We're talking single digits here. Last year, right on red, you're looking at one. Literally one crash reported. Now, I don't know if that's the one with pedestrian or not. I don't think it was. But it is such a small non-problem to be proportionally 30-some% of our ticketing. The fact that the non-camera intersections are at about the same rate as our camera intersections, you know, you look nationally, you're talking 0.2% of crashes are right turn on red. And I understand that some of those involve pedestrians, and I've read the reports. Yeah, some of them involve pedestrians. One of the reports I read said the person stopped and then proceeded to turn right. Completely legal maneuver. So it was a right-on-red crash, but he didn't break the law other than not looking to see the pedestrians.
So that, yeah, he did, because it says in the law that you stop and then you yield
I
to
said,
pedestrian.
other than seeing that there was a pedestrian there.
So
He didn't break a red light. He would not have been able to get a red light camera ticket.
Sure he would have.
No,
Oh, yeah, he would have.
it wouldn't have triggered. He stopped.
But you're looking at it on the camera, and it's like I need a hood on it.
The camera never would have taken his picture.
That's the police guy.
That's what he just said.
What?
After July 1st, we are prohibited from issuing a ticket
Exactly.
or a notice of violation for right on red if the driver comes to a complete stop, regardless if it's after the stop line, before the stop line, in the middle of the stop line. If you come to a complete stop, we're prohibited from issuing you a ticket.
So if you hit the pedestrian, that's still the right of way, isn't it?
Well, I'm not saying he didn't break the law.
Okay. Okay,
He certainly did.
yeah, all right.
But, and you know, there were cases where there was a bicyclist coming across and there was a flashing, no, don't walk. And that person was hit when this guy got a green and started going through and hit the bicyclist. That kind of stuff happens, but a red light camera has nothing to do with being able to prevent that kind of stuff. That's driver inattention or people failing to yield or follow instructions. One crash out of 308 is very, very small. And it just seems like the proportionality of enforcement to danger does not equate here. Related to right on red, I also wanted to talk about the 12 mile per hour standard. Last month, our city's, I don't know what, they're not a magistrate, hearing officer, threw out a 15 mile an hour right on red citation as careful and prudent. We've issued hundreds and hundreds of citations between 12 and 15, and not all of them were reviewed in an appeals process. That seems inconsistent to me, that our hearing officer would be throwing out 15 mile an hour citations or other citations, because she has thrown, I say she, there are 4 women, 3. They've thrown out other right on red citations that were issued where the police review said they weren't careful and prudent, but the hearing officer said they were. That seems inconsistent.
But that's a legal issue. That's what Charlie mentioned earlier. That's
I know it's
That's what judges do.
Judges are inconsistent?
Be careful, they're taking notes.
I really don't have any other statements. I hope all of you read the last half dozen reports I've sent to you.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and do a round of questions for Matt. And
We're late already.
yeah. Okay, we'll start up new,
4 o'clock.
and then we'll go over.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate you, Matt. I do, unfortunately, we don't, I cannot counsel in this area because I don't get your information that you bring before council as a citizen, unpaid citizen. It's not paid by the city of St. Pete or any chemical company. So I appreciate what you do and the time you spend and your own money you partake in getting these traffic studies done to keep people safe in the city. My question to you is, where do you get your data and your information from?
The citation data came from a direct data dump from ATS, requested through the city. It's the first citation information that comes directly from ATS systems.
That came from ATS? Is that all? That's all information you get?
Well, the crash reports from the city, the dozens of public records requests I've issued over the last 3 years. Interviews, talking with people. I've talked to over a dozen FDOT engineers in the last 2 months specifically about slope issues, measuring slope, and how the process of improving intersections goes.
So the 3 sources of primary information is the city of St. Pete, ATS, which is the the camera vendor, and for the Department of Transportation.
Right, well, and the engineering firm that I paid to do the
Oh, yeah, and
elevation survey at
friendly hire.
First and 34th Sounds.
I just want to be known that this is not some minutia you're making up for y'all on the website. This stuff comes from the people that, I guess, get $54 of that 75, and for a large portion of the $54, the city of St. Pete, and also LDOT, who approves these yellow light times and these slopes that are measured or not measured, or whatever's provided to them, they approve it as this various project.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Matt, for all the time and effort you have put into this. Did you ever keep any time as to how much hours you devoted to your hobby of red light cameras? I almost said obsession, but
I will only say too much.
And in our prior workshops on this, in comparing formal training and education on traffic engineering and traffic management and traffic safety, you've acknowledged that our staff has that formal training, and your formal training is really in a different subject area.
Yes, I'm very good at math. We'll leave it at that.
Okay. And in looking at your report, as I read them and go from the first kind of report of here's some facts to the most recent one, my impression is that it's changed some from an informational point to an advocacy point.
As the city reports have as well.
And I just, from a logic point of view, I looked at page 3 of your report, and on the bottom 2 complete paragraphs, what you're saying relating to reoffenders,
Yes.
as opposed to the statistic of approximately 94% being non-reoffenders, if you look at it through the entire 2-year time period, you'd have about 10% reoffenders. Is that what you're...
Yes.
I mean, from my point of view, that still substantiates that having red light cameras changes people's action. That 90% of the people, they get a red light ticket, don't get another one, as opposed to 95%.
In our municipality.
Yes.
That's correct.
Have you done studies of other municipalities?
Well, just speaking for the people that are here that I know have received tickets, it helps some people, it doesn't help others. I'll put it that way.
Okay, but you haven't done any studies of Tampa or other cities to compare what your opinions are of our city
No,
versus those
I haven't
cities?
wanted to spend the money to get that many more tickets, information yet.
And then I go to the next paragraph, and I'm not sure, you're saying there have been 245 vehicles that have received 4 or more citations.
Right.
And then taking the step that had an officer stop them 4 times, their license would be suspended because of the number of points they would have gotten by officers stopping them and giving them a citation that would accumulate points when the red light camera citation doesn't.
Right, that was the point I was trying to make, that the punishment's different for those two. The results are different.
And the 245 reoffenders really concern me. But other than having police kind of follow them around, which probably doesn't work for many reasons, isn't it better that we at least catch them and attempt to deter them by the fine, even if we can't put points on their license? But for the red light cameras, we wouldn't know those 245 people had violated it 4 times.
Well, there's no record if went to traffic court or if anything happened, none of those tickets can be taken into consideration in, suspending a license or ruling that no points be given on an officer-issued citation. All I was trying to point out was that it's not equal. It is much less than an officer-issued citation. I wasn't trying to say that it's completely worthless.
And I guess.
I don't think I've ever made the claim that the program is completely worthless.
So you support keeping it?
I've never made that claim either.
But I mean, the way that's written, it sounds like a bad thing, and I read it, I go, well, at least those 245 vehicles that are repeat offenders of running red lights are getting a monetary punishment as opposed to no punishment whatsoever. That appears to me to be the choice.
Okay.
Okay.
You can have that opinion, that's fine.
Well, do you disagree with the logic of it?
The logic I was trying to say is that officer enforcement is better. You can't compare the two as being equal, and that's all I was trying to put forward.
But how many officers would we have to employ?
Well, 100 and some, right? Weren't we just told?
Right, so it's what you're telling us is, okay, we better have officers at every corner because the enforcement would be equal. That's just economically not possible. And I guess from that, I'm saying I'd rather have at least a picture of them and a fine than go ahead and blow through it every time.
Well, you have a picture of the car. You don't have anything on the driver. You don't know who the driver was. So you don't really know.
Well, we
You're
send it out.
penalizing the owner.
We send it out to the owner of the car, and if he's not the driver, he signs an affidavit and tells us who is.
Unless he doesn't know who the driver is and then he's stuck paying for it.
Or it's his son and he pays the ticket for his son.
Or it's his wife that he pays.
Very personal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, well, anybody else?
This is a police officer, the chief, if he's still ready, he can come up. I just want to try to draw a parallel if I might. With all these red light camera tickets that have been issued and needing the, I guess it's a camera for 6 officers, could you tell me how many impaired individuals have we taken off the road as pertaining to these red light camera tickets?
That figure's available. I don't believe so.
How many more of the dangerous individuals have we taken off the road as pertains to these cameras being used? How many guns have been confiscated at these intersections with these tickets that have been issued for these cameras? The parallel I'm trying to draw is that when an officer, we can take an impaired individual off the road. We can also confiscate weapons. We can also get potentially wanted or dangerous individuals off the street too. In my eyes, that's not the replacing the police officer. That's the parallel I'm trying to draw. A lot of people will sit here and talk about the value and how many you need. For the ones that are out there effective, and they do take a lot of members off the street. They do get a lot of drunken drivers off the street, the people that shouldn't be driving. Because the grim reality is that someone can apply for these lights 11 times to get 11 tickets. And if they pay them in 30 days, it never shows on their record. But if they apply for that 12th time, you killed everybody. You know what I'm saying? No one ever knows. And that was the major point that the first course with camp, and I'm just trying to draw a parallel of the value of the officer versus just having a camera, not saying the camera can do a lot more than they can. And I'm glad that a lot of people find it comical can laugh at it, you know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people are facing hardship receiving these citations that they probably should never have gotten. And that's based on what we've been advertising as far as yellow light time. That keep changing, by the way. And it may be something different next month. But I thank you for your 2 minutes.
Okay,
Charlie?
Matt, do you have the second city report
Got it right in front of me, right here.
page?
Your pages might be different than mine.
It's figure 5, red light related and red light running injury crashes. My page is 16. was being kind earlier. My son is an equal opportunity red light runner. Golf court,
He's one of those
dancing.
multiple.
Thank you, Matt. When he said it helps some people and it doesn't help others.
He also noted that my wife got one on the second day it was working.
You two aren't alone. Should say that.
It's red light related injury and red light running injury crashes. It was the statistics I was referring to earlier, about 70% reduction in injury crashes at the red light, at the camera intersections.
Right.
And your point now that at the 16 non-camera approaches at those same intersections, injury crashes were only down 25%, not 70%.
Well,
So in total, in cumulative at the camera intersections, injury crashes were down 53.6%, right?
the crashes categorized as red light running or red light related injury crashes. What I'm saying is that there is no comparable non-red light running injury crash statistic.
Okay, and so this particular statistic is very, very meaningful to me in my support for the program, okay? So I want to make sure that I'm looking at the best information I can look at. And so I'm asking you, are you aware of any other statistical information or database or place where I can verify and feel right and good about the fact that injury crashes are down? Or not?
I don't have that information yet. I've read all the reports. I only have them going back to the last year. So I can't give you the total injury or the non-red light running or non-red light related injury crashes. Those statistics don't exist at this point.
Okay.
What I would ask you is, what if the non-red light running injury crashes went up 53.6%? What would that mean to you?
It would, if in fact, the distinction between categories, which you've criticized, you've said that these categories are, when you look at the crash reports, it's difficult to say what was red light related, what was red light running, and you think some of these categories are out of whack. But I would say, I wouldn't be looking at non-red light related running injuries, because what I want to know is, are the red light cameras stopping red light running injury crashes?
So any collateral change doesn't matter, would be my question. If the fact that you have...
Well, the cameras aren't trying to stop other behavior that relates in crashes.
But they are changing how crashes are categorized. If you have a video showing that there was a failure to yield crash where the witness says they ran a red light, at a non-camera intersection, that's a red light running crash. At a camera intersection, that's a non-red light running crash. That's what I'm saying.
Say that one more time.
You have a video showing what happened.
Right.
You have a witness contradicting the video. The witness says that person ran a red light. At the camera intersection, you refer to the video and you see it was a failure to yield crash. At a non-camera intersection, you don't have the video, so you have to go based on the witness. The witness said it was a red light running crash. That has happened. That is in. I'm just saying.
There's nothing I can do about that.
Right, but that influences the statistics.
Not at the red light camera intersections, it wouldn't, because you're using the video.
It would, because the before stats you're using, we had no cameras.
But there's no video if there's no red light running.
There is a video if there's no.
You're talking about.
There's no
okay,
snap.
You're talking about the baseline.
There's no license plate.
The baseline statistic.
The baseline before statistics were no
Okay,
camera.
I get what you're
So
saying.
it is influencing these numbers.
Okay, but let's throw out the baseline. Let's throw out the baseline. Injuries went from 5 to 2. Injuries went from 7 to 3. in the red light camera years, forget a baseline, forget pre-red light cameras, injuries are down from first year to second year.
And they're down more in the comparison intersections than they are at the red light camera intersections.
Yeah, but you mean from the 16 to the 4? Is that what you're
Correct.
Okay.
12 to 5, 16 to
So
4.
they're all down.
They're all down, but the
And it's-
non-camera intersections are better.
Okay,
Over
I
those
see.
2 years with cameras.
Okay. All right. That's what I wanted to understand. Thanks.
Steve? And then,
Well, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll say, the only thing I have to say on this is that, I've been consistent. The only time I voted for the cameras was on first reading, second reading, and I voted no every single time. But I'm done with having a discussion on it every single week. Once we vote this time, I'm not going to second anything, I'm not going to support, I'm going to vote no against discussing it for a year, because, once we say what our position is, there's no sense of, there's other issues to discuss and to work on and spend time on them. And I'm against them. I've been against them. I haven't changed my opinion, but I don't want to discuss it every single week. And keep going and keep going and keep going like this. We can get the reports. I trust the mayor to administer the program if that's the direction the council goes. I trust the mayor when there's problems with the program, as he does with all our programs when there's tweaks that need to be made, he made tweaks. And that's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
On Councilmember Cornell's note about just kind of getting out of this loop of constantly debating this issue, it does seem fair to have one more vote, and there's been considerable debate and discussion. There's 2 new council members as part of the composition of this body now. But having said that, after the next vote, I did think that there was a Robert's Rules of Order that if you are not on the prevailing side of the vote, you cannot bring the same matter back up for vote again. And I'd like some clarification on parliamentary procedure so that we can at least know what the end game is on this debate.
Well, parliamentary rules of procedure provide for that. However, that's usually reconsideration within a given meeting or meeting right after that.
Okay.
You are a legislative body. To put that in effect for a legislative body, there's an old opinion, I'll pick it out for you. It probably is not applicable. But you could
So we use it when we
you
want to
can make
use it.
it a rule if you like.
So we just use it when we want to use it. Never mind. It was enforced when I was on the Charter Review Commission. It kept me from bringing things back up. It was okay then.
It was a little different. That was an advisory committee. Actually, it was more than an advisory. Because you had what's happening. Let me talk to you about it.
Okay.
Because
I can kind of view one, but I think it might be where, Matt made a reference to the videos, 30 frames per second, and there's an explanation there. If you could, you briefly touched on, Mr. Connors, about the time clock being on the video camera as opposed to the timer being used for a timer and it's on the phone.
Yeah, there's essentially 2 arguments I'm hearing. Yellow interval should have been shortened earlier, and if it had been, X amount of tickets would not have been issued. The other argument I heard was if you look at the camera video, and in the upper left or right-hand corner, it shows how many seconds that amber light was on, then it shows that your controllers are not working properly. And maybe I'm mischaracterizing or reframing the argument, but essentially, it's trying to imply that camera technology trumps the controller technology. And I disagree with that, because they were researched and developed for totally different purposes. One was developed solely for timing.
I think that's a very important answer mentioned it in your remarks when you came up earlier, and when Matt said it again, that was the first thing I wrote down, these 30 seconds per frame, and the time is different in the corner of the video. And you just got through saying that the video purpose of the video camera is to take video.
Precisely.
Timing is a secondary. The purpose of the timer at a traffic light is for timing.
Correct.
So that's, I just want to make that clear. Also, I need to point out that Florida League of Cities has, Mr. Brandis has brought forth a lot of this stuff, and he's got some legislation he's trying to get through with all this. Florida League of Cities greatly opposes that study that was done, and they say is flawed multiple ways. I think I forwarded that on to Mike and Joe, and pretty much the league, who we have a great deal of confidence in, and somebody we rely on a lot in our community, because they're here for us, and they have talked, and they have made a stance, and I'm trying to remember because I forwarded it on, but I know when I talked to Scott first, and he directed me to the person who was in charge of it, and basically, a lot of the statistics that you're going to hear are flawed because they took intersections and they compared all the intersections to the video intersections, and you can't do that. You have to compare video to video and non-video to non-video, and they lumped them all together. Is that?
And they lumped all angle crashes together. Most angle crashes have nothing to do with red light running. They lumped all rear end crashes together. Most rear end crashes have nothing to do with the light turning red. So there's issues on how you presented that.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you know that there is, it's not pretty cut and dry. I think the research is a little bit flawed there. And I just want to give you the opportunity to express that. And lastly, I want to thank you, Matt. We differed on this, and we have since day one, but I really do appreciate the effort. If we have more people in this community that took an effort and to, delve into something like this, that goes a long way. We have a lot of other, I hope that you would do this to maybe housing and some other things, and we could.
If you get rid of red light cameras, I'd move on to another project.
We didn't need to know what that is this morning.
But I really, and I'm all serious, I really do want to thank you for, you kind of made us a better city because of it, and we've done a lot of in-depth thinking. I think our program here is probably, it's got to be, I can't believe anybody's got a better red light camera program than we do. Just vetted so many times. I am so tired of it. But we have to do it, and I do appreciate everything you've done. And I want to thank Joe and Mike and police department. It's kind of ludicrous to think that we can put enough police officers out there to catch the same number of drivers in those red light cameras. That's crazy. We can't do that. Our police department would be thousands. I mean, it'd be crazy. So I think that this is a good alternative, and I thank all of you for being here and helping in this whole process. And I'll close now. Let the mayor would like to have closing
More
remarks.
information, Mr. Chair, before you go, now, on this legal question, if I could.
You want to ask legal questions?
Yes. Do we go, is there a problem taking a scrub over here workshop, or is it going to report? That's just support to this program.
You can always take a straw vote, it doesn't mean anything, and it's not binding, and we usually discourage it at workshops.
Is it going to be reported upstairs to council on this?
It's certainly,
Or does this die right here?
it can be put, no, you can put it on the agenda.
Just not automatically a workshop.
Not automatically a workshop before the code.
Well, I would like to have it on the, it was initially from the first debate, somebody that I brought about the refund, so I'd like to have it on the agenda upstairs, or we can do it strong, but it's just to see where it's at. That way you want to hear.
You want to do a report from the workshop?
Well, we just, you made a new business, you brought this up last month, and
Right, they got sent down here, or got pushed back, it's, got combined with Charlie's yellow light camera, yellow light time review, and they got all entwined in that, but if you don't want it in the workshop, I won't do it, I'm asking guidance.
So just put, probably the easiest thing, just put it on as new business, discuss the workshop.
what we do here, the vote here, unless the body would like to do it, we're gonna take it upstairs, and that's what it's gonna count, so
Okay.
whatever. Carl?
If I could clarify some cost things, having another hour to do some math, it's not quite as bad as I suggested. As long as you, because I got to translate the actual cost with the neutral and all the rest of that stuff. By January, the city's gross revenue before any of our internal costs or the cost of ATS was $59,995. The direct cost for the police officers who review the films would be around $7,000. I'm sorry, wait a second, I'm sorry. The city's gross revenue was $78,898. The ATS got essentially $60,000. Our direct costs for the police officers that look at the film was about $7,000. And that leaves about $11,900 left as a net. Now that doesn't count, of course, experiences like this where we have 15, city employees, not counting those of us here.
We don't cost it.
No, we don't cost anything. And that doesn't include the police lieutenant or anybody from the clerk's office that handles that, or the surrounding costs of the hearing officers. And so it is possible, as long as you accept that criteria, it's possible we're not quite at break even. But we're, this dog's about to stop hunting.
Okay. Mayor?
Thank you all. First off, thank you, Matt. Appreciate your efforts and certainly respect your passion on this subject matter. And we do appreciate you being involved in what's happening in the city. I really just wanted to respond to a couple comments that were raised and a couple things that I heard today during this workshop. And I think it was an important workshop to have, especially with new council members on. This is really the first opportunity that you all have had to delve into this issue. I know you heard a lot about it during the campaign trail, and it's an important one. First, as to some comments made by Councilmember Gertis, wanted to reiterate the fact that the city relies upon the Department of Transportation and the state in setting the signal timings, and that each of the intersections where there are cameras are on state roads, and the state has to approve the timing. So I guess it's actually broader than you, because it goes to the concerns that were raised about risk. I know our attorneys feel comfortable, as do I, that from a risk standpoint, we're following state procedures and acting with state approval. I think I'm not concerned about that. It's important that that slide is up there right now. I know that wasn't purposely done, but I think I want you to pay particular attention to 10413. Eastbound 38th Avenue at 66 feet north decreased from 5 seconds to 4.4 seconds. There's been a lot of talk about How many people shouldn't have gotten tickets because of a tenth of a second or 2/10 of a second? For all those folks, we should be refunding them their money. So if we use that and extend that logic further, then for each one of those folks who didn't get a ticket, that should have gotten one and would have gotten one had that light been adjusted by 6/10 of a second, do we go back and issue citations to every single person that went through that intersection that didn't get a ticket because the signal, the light time, the yellow, was longer than shorter?
No, but tickets are up. Tickets are up at that intersection because people were trained for a yellow light that was longer, and now it's shorter. So the tickets have gone up in my district.
Inform them with your son.
Excellent.
So I get it.
Yeah, and that also raises the other question when it comes to timing. And I ask all of you, this is just kind of a common sense logical question to ask, is when each of you are driving on the roads and you approach an intersection, do you each know how long that yellow light is supposed to be? How long is the timing supposed to be at that yellow light? Because we all, through our experience in driving, approach intersections, and from our experience, we judge how long do we think it's going to take us. Can we safely stop? Can we safely make it through the intersection without accelerating, which is, by the way, not legal, but a lot of people do it to get through the yellow, to make sure they enter when it's still yellow so it's not red. And would we have stopped had we known? And if a police officer at that same intersection issues you a citation, do you then go to court and argue to the judge, Your Honor, that intersection was 4.2 seconds and it was supposed to be 4.4 seconds? My suspicion is, and I ask that, and the attorneys in particular on this council probably know that that's not an argument that occurs very often. Mr. Florell mentioned about the documentation that's presented, when you use a laser versus, and that there has to be calibration and all those things are presented. When an officer issues a citation, there is no documentation other than the testimony of that officer that that officer saw that person go through the red light, and it's based on that argument that you either fight it or you don't fight it, but there is no documentation regarding that. There's been a number of discussions or comments made about the cameras and whether they're designed to measure speed. Cameras are not designed, those particular cameras are not designed to measure speed. They're designed to take a snapshot and a video of the violation. Their design was not specifically done for speed. There's been talk about right on reds. I will confess that I too had some serious questions of whether we should be eliminating issuing citations on right on reds because it's so controversial. Quite frankly, it bothers me the fact that the law, when you use a camera, in some ways is more lenient. And if we get rid of cameras, people that aren't being cited today for right on red, if we have an officer at that intersection, are now going to receive a citation. They're not going to have, it's actually more stringent, and in addition to the fact that somebody is now going to get a citation, they're going to get a citation that costs $264 versus $158, and they're going to get points on their record, which they don't get right now. That's an important point. Councilmember Foster talked about perception, and I agree with you. Perception in our business in particular, we deal a lot with perception. But the one thing I would caution everyone, and I apply this to myself too, is that we have to be careful we don't govern based on perception, that we govern based on what's in the best interest overall of our residents. And I apply that to I'm not pointing you out, I just wanted to put that out there, and I apply that to myself also. Mr. Chair, you talked about rear-end collisions a little bit, and I know that's always been an issue. The law in the state of Florida is that there is a presumption of negligence in a rear-end collision. So if these lights, and our statistics show, at least in St. Pete, that these lights do not cause more rear-end collisions, Chair is absolutely right. The law requires you to maintain a safe distance whether the vehicle in front of you comes to a sudden stop or not, and failure to do so will result in you being held by case law and by statute to be presumed to be negligent for your conduct. Councilmember Rice, you talked about earmarking funds, and we will look at that. I think that's a very valid point that you raised. That is something that we will take a look at right away and see how that we can best utilize those funds, although from what Councilmember Nurse is telling us, it's not that much. But nevertheless, if we're going to have a program, I think it is beneficial that those dollars go towards education, go towards healthcare, and if there is a specific utilization of those funds. And then the last point that I want to make, and this I think is an important point. We've heard a lot today about what's alleged to be right or wrong with this program. And as I said right from my opening comments, to me it's always been about public safety. What we didn't hear today was what the alternatives are if we get rid of these cameras to try and make these intersections safe, that we save lives, that we reduce crashes. We didn't hear that. And one of the things that I hope we never become is like Washington and Tallahassee, where programs get criticized and thrown out and there's no alternatives that are suggested. And we didn't hear any real alternatives today. We did hear that to maintain or to have these intersections, I don't want to say guarded, but examined or observed to the same degree that you get with the cameras would take at least 100 more officers. And we certainly don't have the budget to do that. And so to me, this has been a cost-effective way of trying to change behavior, a cost-effective way of trying to reduce accidents, reduce injuries, reduce fatalities, to make us safer for our residents, but also for those who visit us and who are interested in a good quality of life and come to this community because of that. It hasn't been, nor should it be, a moneymaker or a big moneymaker for this community. And again, I don't care what other communities are doing. Quite frankly, I'm offended by what I see happening in a lot of other communities. But to us, it's always been about safety. It'll always be about safety. On that note, thank you all for your time.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
I got a quick question. Workshop at public meeting.
Decision-making process.
You brought the line. When you were sleeping, when you said that was restored, and that was how could you not stay awake from your window?
No, it just, there has to be public some.
How are you? Good. It's one coach up there.